For more than 50 years, this motorcycle had been forgotten, slowly disappearing beneath rust, dust, and time.
Then, after decades of silence, someone finally opened the door. Beneath all that dirt and corrosion, a forgotten machine was still waiting to be discovered.
Underneath the dirt, there was still a trace of what this machine once was. The original paint had survived, but the years had left their mark on almost everything else. The wheels were frozen, the engine was silent. But the machine was not beyond saving. He had made his decision. This forgotten motorcycle would ride again. It was far too heavy to move by hand. So the rescue began with a simple plan: get the forgotten machine out of the darkness and into the light.
For the first time in decades, daylight touched its frame. The old machine was finally leaving the place where it had been forgotten.
Now, in the open light, there was nowhere for the damage to hide. Rust had consumed almost every surface, but side. The first inspection revealed just how serious the damage was. The front wheel was seized, the brakes were frozen. Then came the heart of the machine. The 650cc twin-cylinder engine was completely silent, seized solid after detonation.
The damage was far worse than expected, but turning back was no longer an option. After more than 50 years,
the first bolt was one of the hardest. Decades of rust had locked the tank to the frame. But slowly, the corrosion began to give way.
With the last bolts removed, the fuel tank finally came free. Underneath it was another layer of damage. The seat had suffered just as badly. The leather had dried and cracked, while the metal beneath it had almost disappeared beneath rust. Nothing had escaped the passage of time. Even the simplest controls were frozen by rust. One careful piece at a time, the old machine had to be taken apart. Even the headlight had been sealed by time. Behind the cloudy glass and rusted chrome was another piece of the motorcycle's forgotten history. The exhaust had survived the years, but barely. Rust had fused its fasteners together. With patience, the first pipe finally came free. Now came the most delicate part of the teardown. The engine was the heart of the motorcycle, and after decades of corrosion, and finally, the heart came out. After decades locked inside the engine was frame. With the engine gone, there was nowhere left for the damage to hide. The bare frame revealed decades of corrosion. Removing the surface rust revealed a more serious problem. In several places, corrosion had eaten deep into the steel. Some corrosion had gone too far to save. The weakened steel had to be removed completely, leaving only strong metal behind for the repair. The damaged steel was gone. Now a new section had to be made to match the original frame exactly. Precision. The new steel was finally joined to the original frame. Each weld had to be controlled, clean, and strong enough to carry the weight of the machine once again. Once the welds had cooled, the rough edges were carefully ground smooth. Slowly, the repair disappeared into the original shape of the frame. With the structural repairs complete, it was time to erase decades of corrosion. Under the abrasive blast and rust slowly, and suddenly, the old frame looked completely different. With the rust and paint gone, the clean steel finally revealed what was worth saving.
The bare steel could not stay exposed for long. A strong anti-corrosion primer was applied first, creating the foundation for everything that would come next.
The first coat was only the beginning. Every tiny imperfection had to be corrected before paint. The goal was simple, and this was the first real glimpse of the motorcycle's future. Layer by layer, the lifeless frame began to return to its original character. The outside was only half the story. Inside the tank, decades of old fuel and moisture had created another battlefield of corrosion. Inside the tank, the corrosion had been building for decades. Slowly, the old rust was loosened and removed, exposing the metal beneath. The rust was gone, but the job was not finished. A protective inner coating would give the old tank a second chance and keep corrosion from taking it back. The tank carried every mark of its past. Before new paint could bring it back, every scratch, dent, and layer of faded paint had to be carefully corrected. Years of neglect had left their marks, but the metal was still worth saving. With patience and precision, each dent was slowly returned to its original shape. The major dents were gone, but perfection lives in the smallest details. A thin layer of filler would level the final imperfections before the new finish.
Now came the final preparation. Every curve had to be smooth, every reflection continuous. Only then would
the bodywork was finally ready for primer. This layer would seal the repairs and create the perfect foundation for the finish that would define the motorcycle's new identity.
The final imperfections were almost invisible to the eye, but they would show beneath fresh paint. So the primer. After weeks of preparation, the first real color finally arrived. The lifeless gray surface began transforming into deep. The color was complete, but the transformation was not. Layer by layer, clear coat gave the old tank a depth and shine it had not seen in decades. The paint was already beautiful, but true restoration lives in the final details. One last refinement transformed the glossy surface into a mirror. The big transformation was almost complete. Now the smallest details mattered. Old chrome was carefully polished until it could shine beside the new black finish.
The frame was beginning to look new, but the heart of the motorcycle still carried decades of neglect. Now it was time to bring the old twin-cylinder engine back to life.
With the outside finally clean, there was nowhere left to hide. The engine had to be opened, and inside, decades of heat, oil, and neglect were waiting.
The cylinder came away slowly, revealing the heart of the old engine. The pistons had survived decades of use. Years of combustion had left a thick layer of carbon on the pistons. Slowly, it was removed.
The cylinders had survived, but their surfaces had lost their precision. A careful hone restored the fine crosshatch